Hello from freezing cold Chicago. It's about 25 degrees today, and it feels just about every bit as cold as it says. So hopefully you're enjoying yourself, staying warm over there in Southern California. Today I'm going to be talking about my current place of work, which is North Park University, and a leadership development program for specifically residence life and housing, which is the department that I work in. So just to give a little background about North Park, it's a small Christian university with about 2,200 students. The mission of North Park University, as an intentionally Christian university of the Evangelical Covenant Church, is to prepare students for lives of significance and service through education in the liberal arts, professional studies, and theology. The core values in North Park are that they are distinctively Christian, intentionally urban, and purposefully intercultural. So a little background about my particular department is that we reside within the wider range of student engagement. So this is just an organizational chart of student engagement. You can see at the top, the Vice President for Student Engagement is Jody Coslow Martin. And then you can see our department is underneath the Dean of Students, whose name is Elizabeth Snezik. And we'll go a little bit deeper into exactly what my department looks like. So in the residence life and housing, we have one interim director, Aiden Howarth. We have 5 resident directors, including myself, and then we also have 31 paraprofessional student staff, who we call resident advisors, or RAs for short. And the mission statement of residence life and housing at North Park University is to provide safe and healthy living environment where residents will be supported academically, develop personally and interpersonally, grow spiritually, and develop broader sense of community and cultural understanding. And an important thing to understand when we talk about residence life and housing at North Park University is this challenge that we were given by Jody, who's the Vice President of Student Engagement, who asked us as a staff to strive towards filling 1,000 beds on campus. We're at about 950 right now, so we're trying to figure out how to push it over the top and be able to have 1,000 students on campus. So the guiding principles that I chose for this, I kind of retooled the philosophy or the mission statement of residence life. I think this kind of covers it in a little bit more brief and a little more specific way. I think that our mission statement could be, as a residence life staff, we provide quality living areas in which community learning and personal development can grow. And then the conceptual framework, I chose a leadership pipeline of sorts, guiding students from their freshman year here at North Park through the residence life and housing program. So a freshman student would start as what I would call an assistant resident advisor. This is a whole new position that we'd be creating, and it's basically just a chance for first-year students to get exposed to what it is to be involved in residence life. The second position in the timeline or in the pipeline would be a resident advisor. This is the student leaders who guide a hall, wing, or stack. Usually that's about 30 to 50 residents. And then from there, a senior resident advisor would be a guide for the assistant resident advisors. So they'd have their own group within the living area of assistant resident advisors, and they'd be supervised by the senior resident advisor. Also, alongside that, they would assist in leadership development of the entire resident advisor staff. And then this would also be another new position, this assistant resident director. This is a position for a student or a graduate student who wants to get involved in residence life, but doesn't necessarily have the ability to go in a full-time way at that point. So basically, the assistant resident director would provide clerical support for the residence directors and the residence life staff. They would conduct a residence life task of some form, and they would also assist the other resident directors on anything else that they would need. So the operational strategy that I would be looking to use would be linear in that we would introduce the change first. We would develop specific leadership competencies based off of the things that we find valuable in residence life professionals. And then after that, we would develop an assessment tool. We would procure support from Jody and from the president of the university, President Parkin. And then after that, we would implement the change and then assess from there. So that'd be kind of the practical steps of how to implement this program. So the specific competencies that we're choosing, or that I think go well here, would be practical competencies, social competencies, and analytical competencies. So it talked about in the book a lot about how to structure this specifically, and I think the system that they use in the book is excellent, where we would have a beginner level, a competent level, and then an expert level for each one of these. What these competencies are specifically, we would have to develop as a team, because a lot of the residence life job is very social. So I could see there being a lot more for that, whereas the practical may not be quite as large, but the analytical is also really important as well. So we would have to develop that as a team. So now we move into the assessment piece. The assessment is really, really important in residence life. So this is what we already have in place. We evaluate every semester. There's resident feedback for our RAs, and there's also supervisor feedback directly from the RDs. The only problem with this is that it's really difficult to do on a yearly basis when you're getting new students every 9 months. And I think the most important thing here is that as we look to assess our system, we continue to track how we're doing over a longer period of time, because there's been a pretty significant amount of change in the last couple of years in residence life here at North Park, and so we want to make sure that we're getting better rather than just continuing to do the same things over and over again. All right, so plans for securing administrative and financial support, and this basically boils down to two questions for where are we now and where can we go. At this point, we have a great deal of support from Jody and from our administration. And that's really valuable, where they give us a lot of freedom to be able to do the things that we do well and to be able to be successful at them. But obviously, this is a whole new thing, and this, for the most part, would take a lot of support financially, because if we're going to be creating new positions, that means that we're hiring new people, we're paying their salaries, as well as paying for their rent too, which is pretty significant here in the city of Chicago. This is so annoying. Sorry about that. My radiator's banging like crazy. All right, so yes, support. I already have a great deal of support, which is fantastic, but it's going to continue to require a great deal of money, which is always difficult, no matter which industry you're in, but specifically in higher education. So now we're going to move into defining roles and individual learning plans. So this is, I think, probably the strength of this model, where we use this as it involves residence life. So I'm going to start from the top of the leadership pipeline and then work our way down. So first is the director of residence life, and the director's job is to set and drive vision. And also, more relationally, their job is to develop resident director leader competency as well. The resident directors then promote that vision, and they in turn develop the senior resident advisors and the resident advisor leadership competencies. Then you move into the senior resident advisors, who embody and pass on that vision. They develop the assistant resident advisors, and they also serve the RA staff as well. Then you move down into the resident advisor, who also embody and pass on that vision, and they serve and develop their specific residents in order to plug them into this pipeline. And then at the lowest level, the assistant resident advisors, who are just the freshmen on campus who are just learning, they're learning the vision of residence life. They're learning the mission statement, the values that we hold, and then they're serving their fellow residents out of knowing those things. And then hopefully moving on to resident advisor and continuing on up the pipeline. So next we move into learning modules, and this is something that we are in a good place to be able to do well as a staff here at North Park. We already have in place fall training, which is an intensive 2-week training time where we teach the RAs basically how to do everything that it is that they have to do. And then move into spring training, which is an intensive week where if we miss anything in fall or there's things that we need to correct in fall, we help students to be able to do that well in spring. So we already have the ability and the time to be able to do that, and I think if we took a module approach, it would be even more dynamic. So now we move into the implementation strategy. So Yeah, here we go. So this is our team right here. So the first person that would be incredibly important to get behind this strategy or this new leadership development would be Carl Balsam, who's the executive vice president and the chief financial officer here at North Park. Basically, anything that touches money, Carl is in charge of. So procuring the necessary funds starts and ends with talking to Carl and making sure that he's on our side. So it'll be very important to be able to present this and present it well and have a very set program by the time we talk to Carl. And then the next step would be Jody Coslow Martin, who's the vice president for student engagement. And with Jody's support, Residence Life and Housing can actually implement this program. It's one thing to be able to procure the funds, but also very important to be able to actually go and do it. And she supports us in innovating, and we've been blessed to be able to, under her leadership, do some new things, and we could possibly implement a new leadership development strategy. And then the next step down would be Aiden, or the director of Residence Life and Housing. With Aiden's vision and support, the rest of the team can feel empowered to develop leaders. Aiden has made it very clear, not only through his words but his actions, that he is for us as resident director and as resident directors and as a staff. And if it's in the best interest of our program, he is always willing to allow us to change and to be able to do new things. So it's really valuable to have a supervisor who would be willing to help us see this change out. And so I could see Aiden being behind doing this possibly. And then the last one would be resident directors. Without the support of the resident director team, the program cannot be successful. If one of us is really into it, then there are 4 people who aren't, and that's not going to work. Our students need to see a united front. And so we, as a team, will go and move this forward if it's something that we're going to end up doing. And it will definitely begin and end with our team doing it together. So that's it. That was my presentation, my leadership development ideas here in residence life at North Park University. If you have any questions, feel free to add them to the comment section. I'd be happy to answer those questions. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay warm.